Yes. Barrister, thank you very much. I will start with you by, we would love to hear from you the history of Southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonia, before 20th May 1972. What has happened, what was happening in Southern Cameroons before 1972, 20th May. And in the part B of that question of this session, you will be telling us and what are equally the impact of this 20th May 1972 on Southern Cameroon, aka Amazonia. You will go ahead and discuss, and we will equally listen on these talking points from Barrister Besha and Prof. Ayin. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, our host, Maya Rachel and Patty King. Um, it's a very tall assignment for me this morning. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Uh, I want to start by saying that Professor Bridget Tebo very professionally presented the 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 press paper of the President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, where she exposed the history of the Southern Cameroons. So I'm going to take it not very detailedly, following what her presentation this morning. It was a rerun this morning. Now, the Germans were defeated in World War One by the Allied forces. And as a result of that, the Germans lost their territory in Africa and in other places in of the world. And there was partitioning of the former former German colonies on the African continent in the Berlin Conference. As a result of that, Cameroon, spelled with a K, that stretched both from Cameroon and the Congo and the Gabon and Equatorial Guinea and all that were all under the German territory, the German colonies. So Cameroon was partitioned into two. 80% went to the French and 20% to the British, partners in the Allied forces. We were the 20% that went to the British. And after 1945, when the British had already partitioned us into two, having the northern Cameroon cut off from the southern Cameroons, the southern Cameroons became a trust territory. It was under the colonial British rule from after the World War, but after 1945, they became a Class B trust territory mandated by the United Nations under the British. In 1954, our people, having been attached to Nigeria for purposes of governance, the British separated us from Nigeria based on the treatment we got from Enugu Parliament. And we became a self-ruled territory mandated by the British. And we became self-ruled from 1954. And the first premier that was elected was Dr. E.M.L. Ndele. And after that, I'm just giving the headlines. After that, Dr. John Poncha defeated Dr. E.M.L. Ndele in 1959 to become the second premier, prime minister. And in that same 1959, on the 10th of July, there was the Manfred Conference to prepare us for independence. Because according to the resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly, and I'm not going to bore you with the legal terminologies of all those, but I will cite the resolution 1514, 1542, and 1608. But I will be dwelling mostly on 1608. But before that, Mamfe Conference took place, and the questions that were to be decided by the population or the representatives of the population, and those representatives came from Parliament, from the House of Chiefs, and from opinion leaders in the Southern Cameroons, and they met in a conference in Mamfe to debate the issue of our independence, whether we want to become independent or we want to become independent by joining Nigeria. The question of the Southern Cameroon was never at issue in that conference. Our people voted unanimous, very, very, very highly, I think 67%, for us to have our independence. In that conference, there was a British diplomat that represented the British in that conference to ensure that the conference went smoothly. Dr. John Nsoh now traveled to the United Nations with the results of that conference. And hey, for some reason, for some fraudulent reason between the French and the British, what happened? Dr. John Nsoh returned with the two alternatives that met the reason for the 11th of February plebiscite. I emphasize plebiscite, not referendum, because we were not part of La République du Cameroon. We have never been part of La République du Cameroon. So it was a plebiscite to ask the opinion of our people, whether we want to join Nigeria or want to join Cameroon when we have our independence. And I tell you, that was not what was decided in Mamfe. And the mistake that was done by our people was that they didn't take that two alternative to the Southern Cameroon Parliament to look at it and see whether we accept it or we don't accept those two alternatives. But John Nsoh came back happy. Oh, we have an opportunity to join our brothers. What a tragedy. At any rate, on 11th of February 1961, there was a plebiscite. That plebiscite was decided that we will join, after independence, we will join La République du Cameroon to actualize our independence. So independence was now voted for by the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 21st of April 1961 in what we commonly refer to now as Resolution 1608. At that time, if you read that resolution of the General Assembly in its Article 1, 2, and 3 and following, we were granted independence by joining. And that independence was voted for 64 rather, for, 23 against, and 10 abstentions. And it was voted, and we had independence by joining La République du Cameroon. And in that same resolution, there were conditions for joining. Because we were now an independent country, we were now going to have conditions, the policies that will be applied between La République du Cameroon and the Southern Cameroons. Hey, what happened? That was enshrined in paragraph 5 of that resolution 1608. That conference didn't take place and has not taken place up to this time that we are talking. Something happened. They called the Mamfe conference, the Fumban conference. And that Fumban conference, yielded no fruits, no document was signed, no agreement was agreed. But on the 1st of September 1961, La République du Cameroon in its own parliament, the parliament of the east of La République of Cameroon, as it then was, voted the federal constitution. That federal constitution was retroactively applied to the southern Cameroons by Amadou Ahidjo after October 1961, or before on the day effective on the 1st of October 1961, without it being ratified by the Southern Cameroon's parliament. Because when we had our autonomy, semi-autonomy from the British, we maintained a parliament, a government in the Southern Cameroons. Of course, with its limitations of defense and foreign affairs, because those were reserved for the British. What happened? That federal constitution was never presented to the Southern Cameroons Ambazonia for ratification. Ahidjo retroactively a constitution that was voted and promulgated on the 1st of September 1961, when we were still under the British rule, was applied to us on the 1st of October 1961, retroactively, against the law and against natural justice. At any rate, on the 30th of September, that same year, 1961, La République du Cameroon moved its gendarmes and its military into Boya, Bamenda, and all the strategic points in the southern Cameroons and took over the southern Cameroons by force, breaking 1st of October, our Independence Day. On that Independence Day, the British betrayed the southern Cameroons by bringing down the Union Jack, and instead of handing it to Foncha, who was then the premier, elected premier by the Southern Cameroon House of Assembly, they presented it instead to Ahidjo instead of to Foncha, selling us to La République du Cameroon. From there on, La République du Cameroon called us West Cameroon and called themselves East Cameroon. In that same constitution, they had on their own partitioned us West Cameroon and themselves East Cameroon. There we still had some kind of autonomy because our parliament was still maintained, our resources were still maintained, our economic infrastructure was still maintained, and Ahidjo sent to Boya an
in West
administrator.
Sahara, both of which are usually known by people.
Sent to Boya an administrator who was there to overrule anything that West Cameroon decided in their parliament or in their government. Hey, this administration general from Yaoundé was imposed on us by Ahidjo. That was not all. Ahidjo, on his own, replaced the next prime minister that was elected by parliament, Augustin Ngomjoa, against all laws and all natural justice in the southern Cameroons. He independently replaced him with a non-elected member of parliament, Solomon Tandem Muna. Solomon Tandem Muna, at that time, and as it then was, up to when he retired from La République government, became the official betrayer of the Southern Cameroon. He was forced and made prime minister of the Southern Cameroons without being a member of parliament by Amadou Ahidjo. I don't want to belabor the point. That is my succinct presentation of the history of the Southern Cameroon before 1972. And I will now get into 1972 and its impact on our people. 1972, in violation of the constitution that I just talked to you about, the 1961 constitution that was retroactively applied to us, in its Article 47, it actually says no law, no vote will impede the federal nature of the state, of the Federal Republic of Cameroon. The Federal Republic, the federation that was imposed on us. We have never joined La République du Cameroun based on Resolution 1608. Nothing in the United Nations Secretariat or anywhere else in history is there anything to show that we joined La République du Cameroun in pursuance of Resolution 1608. It never existed. However, we became a de facto federal structure, part of the de facto federal structure of the Federal Republic of Cameroon from October 1961 until 1972. 1972 came and Ahijo unilaterally called for a referendum in violation of Article 47 of the Federal Constitution, which I just cited. It was very, very scandalous. The world watched Ahijo conduct a referendum. He calls it a referendum, and convene the electorate from all of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, which was made out of 20% Southern Cameroons and 80% La République du Cameroun, or East Cameroon, as you can call it. And the results was overwhelming because it was fraudulent, openly fraudulent. One ballot paper, on one side, it was written we, on the other side, it was written yes, which means the same thing. That is the story of the fraudulent referendum and the so-called reunification. They call it reunification instead of calling it unification, because we went into that federal structure as equal states and with equal status. The proof of that is even La République du Cameroon recognized that when they voted that federal constitution that was retroactively applied to us. And that Article 47 is an indication that we were a separate state. Because if you read the letter of that Article 47, you will conclude that the federal nature of the state was not supposed to be touched because there were two states that made up the Federal Republic of Cameroon. But Ahijo violated that. And why did he do it? Because they discovered crude oil in Victoria and in the Gulf of Guinea. And the French said, if you don't abolish that federation, you will never be able to exploit that oil. And that's what it did to us. The impact of 1972. What happened? Before, during, and after 1972, Ahijo started dismantling our economic structure, our political structures, and everything that was Southern Cameroon. The first thing was the banking. Cameroon Bank went. They closed down Cameroon Bank in Southern Cameroon and opened a Cameroon Bank headquarters in Douala. I still know the building in Douala up to today. The only thing remaining in the Southern Cameroon as Cameroon Bank was a few branches to cater for individual depositors. They moved all the funds that were raised by Produce Marketing Board and the bank in Cameroon Bank to their own treasury, and they built that ugly thing that you see, that tall building you see in Bonajo, in Douala, and they went ahead to sell all of Cameroon Bank buildings in the Southern Cameroon. They went ahead. The next thing was to abolish Produce Marketing Board, which was the economic live wire of the Southern Cameroon, both in cocoa and coffee. What did they do? They abolished the Produce Marketing Board, brought everything to Douala and called it Office National de Office National de Commercialisation des Produits Agricoles in Douala. And Produce Marketing Board was sold out in the Southern Cameroon. All the structure, all the buildings, all the warehouses were sold by La République du Cameroon. And all the funds of Produce Marketing Board, the biggest economic, the biggest commercial company that commercialized our agricultural products, was dismantled by La République du Cameroon and brought to their territory and killed all that in the Southern Cameroon. The next thing that happened was that they dismantled even our electricity corporation, PowerCam. PowerCam was a hydroelectric company that was established in Yoke, that was done in Yoke during the self-governing period of our country from 1954 to 1961. It was supplying electricity from Victoria to Cambe, hydroelectricity, and very cheap. What did they do? They went to Yoke, dismantled it, abolished PowerCam, and brought their Sonel. And their Sonel came and were commercializing electricity power in the Southern Cameroon at a very exorbitant rate, which most of our people could not afford. Most of our villages and towns remained without current, without electricity for several years before the so-called Sonel did what they did to supply minimally the current that we now have, which is now they use to exploit our people as we speak. They dismantled Santa Coffee. Santa Coffee was the largest Southern Cameroon's coffee plantation that was producing a lot of coffee that was being marketed by our marketing board. What happened to cocoa was that they brought in Francophones into Kumba and Tombel and Manunguba, where we had a lot of cocoa and coffee. Even right down to the Dialem, we had cocoa and coffee. They brought Francophones to buy not only the warehouses, but to enter into private buying of our cocoa from our farmers. They reduced our farmers from the rich people that they were during the Southern Cameroon to peasant farmers with little or nothing. And they bought our cocoa and our coffee and everything and brought it to the Southern Cameroon, to La République du Cameroon. And La République du Cameroon took now all our cocoa and coffee at a very, very minimal price and sold it to world market at a good price and made money. They were managing what you call ONCPP that I just talked about in Douala. And since they dismantled Produce Marketing Board, No Southern Cameroonian has been made general manager of office of ONCPB that I talked about.
Mm.
Not one. They manage it by themselves. And the last one I saw when I grew up to be a man was one I don't know, a Betty man that was now the general manager in Douala. And of course, our people lost not only the British Marketing Board, they lost Santa Coffee, they lost WADA. WADA is Womb Area Development Agency. They lost
Mm. Authority.
everything, including even the rice project in Dop was being managed by the Francophones in Dop. They dismantled all our economic infrastructure. Political infrastructure. They closed down the Southern Cameroon's parliament. We had no voice. The number of seats that we had in the federal parliament were abolished, and now it was a Cameroon parliament with little representation from the Southern Cameroons. And what happened to Poncha? You may want to ask me. Poncha walked away in 1970 when he protested the referendum of 1972. And when he called a meeting of his people, he found out that Ahijo had corrupted everybody except Bonlong and Augustine Gomja. And EMMNDele. The rest, Ebetabe and others were corrupted, and Poncha could not get any support against this so-called referendum, and of course the
Let me see.
1972, the 20th May 1972 saga. Poncha left disgraced and went to Gwen and stayed there till he died. Muna, the traitor, took over and managed and became the president of the National Assembly, the so-called National Assembly, the first National
The book
Assembly of
is
1972, when he retired and went to Gembo and died. Our forefathers, they did what they had to do. They did their best. Their best was not good enough. This is what has happened to us.